Alright, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Irvin Pena, also known as Irv Official. So today we have quite a bit of ground to cover, from President Trump's executive orders to the unemployment plus up to negotiations and a new timeline that we are finally starting to get concerning this next round of stimulus. So without further ado, let's get right into this. So concerning the negotiations, right now there's four key players that we really need to keep an eye on. That's Mark Meadows and Steven Mnuchin for the Republicans. And then for the Democrats, we have Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And here's what's been going on with both sides of the board. Now, it's safe to say that they finally agreed on things like education funding, testing kits. They've also come to a conclusion that a next round of stimulus checks is actually going to be in there. Thank God, I didn't think that that was going to be up for debate, but we can finally say that they've put that to the side and they're starting to move forward with other things. Now, one thing that's still kind of up in the air though is the liability protection, but more so the guidelines that would actually be involved with it. If it's just going to be for employees, or if it's just going to be for employers, if it's going to include the union, or if it's just going to be for corporations. But one of the biggest issues that we're having right now is that they can't really seem to agree or really meet for anything more than 2 or 3 hours. So the way that it's been working right now is they've been meeting, and by they, I'm talking about Meadows, Mnuchin, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi. They meet and then they separate and they go to their collective parties, Democrats and Republicans, and then they pitch the ideas or they pitch the counteroffers that were presented within their own exclusive meeting. And then they come back together and they discuss, okay, this is what we came up with, this is what we want to counter, this is what we want to have, this is what we want to take away. But we finally have a little bit of breathing room in regards to a timeline. And so this is what Steven Mnuchin said after yesterday's meeting concerning the timeline. And remember, Steven Mnuchin is the guy that Donald Trump has left in charge of the IRS. So he's pretty much the guy that hits the button and we all receive our stimulus checks. In fact, he had some good news to say about that. He said that with a push of a button, he can have about 50 million stimulus payouts for this next round in less than a week. So that right there is really some good news that we're finally starting to get from this whole thing. So this is what Mnuchin had to say about yesterday's meeting. He said, "We're not at the point of being close to a deal, but we did try to set a timeline." Thank God they're finally starting to set a timeline, right? Anyways, he later added, "We're going to try to reach an overall agreement if we can get one by the end of this week so that legislation could then pass by next week." Now, going back into that timeline, if everything comes to pass, kind of like what Steven Mnuchin's saying, if we actually go off of what they're predicting, which is to have something agreed on by Friday, we give them a week extension because remember, they're supposed to go on their recess August 7th. Well, that means that they should have hopefully something passed by the 13th, if not the 14th of next week, which lands right around Thursday or Friday. And so if we tack on an additional week for the 50 million Americans that he claims that they can have stimulus checks to. And when they say stimulus checks, they really mean direct deposits, by the way, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That means that you could receive a stimulus check, assuming it passes, like they're saying, somewhere along the lines of the 3rd week of August, so right around the week of the 20th, the 21st, around there. And also, if you guys are finding value in this content, don't forget to hit that like button because apparently YouTube likes to promote content that has a ton of likes on it. And so as a creator, that is the only thing that I ask from you guys, is to go ahead and hit that like button and share it with anyone that you know that would find this information useful in a time like this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the world's fastest negotiation that we are witnessing before our eyes. And hopefully you can tell that I am being extremely sarcastic with this. I mean, what were they doing for the entire month of July leading up, heading into August, before the HEALS Act was even presented? I mean, they are literally now going line by line with the HEROES Act and the HEALS Act and saying, okay, we like this, we don't like this, we want that, we don't want to keep this. What were our leaders doing the entire month of July? I mean, seriously, they're now starting to come back in and really start to iron out the details. I mean, isn't this something that they all mentioned that they were working on? And look, I'm talking about both parties, that they were working on before this entire, before Congress went back into recess or came back from recess and went back to work, so to speak. And now we're having to add on an additional extension to the timeline that they're looking to go on recess just because they didn't have anything figured out or any game plan up to this point. I mean, seriously. But anyways, cue in Mitch McConnell. Now, before we get Mitch McConnell's comments, if you guys don't know who Mitch McConnell is, he is the Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans. Up to this point, he has been kind of like the bottleneck in this entire system that hasn't really allowed things to flow the way that they should be, just because he's been a little bit more uptight. He's the guy that said that the HEROES Act would be dead on arrival. He's also the guy that pretty much wrote up the HEALS Act, which so many of you guys feel that it heals absolutely nothing. But anyways, that's a completely different story. We're not going to get into that because we want to focus on Mitch McConnell's comments. And now before we do, if you guys haven't done so already, pick up your free audiobook with the sponsors of this video over at Amazon's Audible. They've made it super easy and convenient for members of the official community to pick up a free copy and enjoy a free month with Amazon's Audible. Link in the description. You guys can go ahead and check that out. So it looks like Mitch McConnell is finally starting to give in. Up to this point, he's kind of just had his arms crossed, hasn't been to any meetings, hasn't really made too many press releases, hasn't really spoken with the media too much about what they want or what they've been negotiating on. At this point, we've just seen Mark Meadows and we've seen Stephen Mnuchin for the Republicans, who seem to be more of kind of like the middle grounds for both sides. But actually, Mitch McConnell did have some interesting comments to say regarding the $600 a week plus up for the unemployment. As you guys know, that's been right around $2,400 for you guys, which up to this point, that's been a huge stake in the ground apart from the eviction moratorium. But this is what Mitch McConnell actually had to say about the $600 plus up. I think he's starting to cave. I mean, you guys tell me. I think that these negotiations, he's kind of started to get rattled a little bit, and I think at this point he just wants to go home. This is what Mitch McConnell had to say. Wherever this thing settles between the President of the United States and his team, who has to sign it into law, and the Democrats, no insignificant minority in the Senate and majority in the House, is something I'm prepared to support. Wow. That is the absolute first time we've ever heard him side with the $600 plus up. But listen to this last part that he mentions. Even if I have some problems with certain parts of it. This is huge because, again, he's been such a roadblock to get anything done, let alone the $600 plus up that millions of Americans and economists can agree that people need it. Now, some people can say it's debatable because, you know, people should just go back to work, and like Republicans have been saying, it's a disincentive, which it's been brought up in their debates back and forth in negotiations. If it's a disincentive, if it's actually holding people from going back to work. But we do have economists that have been coming out and saying, had it not been for that, we would have seen poverty levels dip above that 16%. Now, that is huge, and that going forward, I think that they finally started taking notes on what economists are saying, because I know that a lot of people, and I see the comments, are upset about so many of your friends claiming the unemployment. Now, is it to say that some people abuse the system or not? Look, that's entirely up to them. But statistics show that 4 out of 5 Americans are actually claiming unemployment for the first time in their work life. Now, what does President Trump have to do with all of this, and why does he play such a key role? I mean, isn't it up to Senate and isn't it up to Congress or the House of Representatives to pass something before it even gets to the president? The answer to that is yes, but there is also something called an executive order that the president can put in place in order to get some things done in the event that Congress moves at a snail's pace, which, if you haven't noticed, they kind of have been. You see, in this case, he's actually been considering taking some type of unilateral action, which would allow him to ultimately extend the $600 plus up for the unemployment as well as the eviction moratorium. This is what the president had to say about this. A lot of people are going to be evicted, and I'm going to stop it because I'll do it myself if I have to. Now, those comments are coming from the president himself, not to mention that he's also had talks and mentioned about having some type of payroll tax cut. Now, with the payroll tax cut, we know that he wasn't able to get that with the HEALS Act because they left that part out, but it still looks like he kind of wants to pursue that. The way that he would be able to do that is by the executive order. Now, going back hindsight, we would still need some type of Congress approval of that. If not, then Americans would have to pay that payroll tax cut that they saved back, unless they can pass some type of legislation that would kind of just forgive those funds that they received during this pandemic. So if you guys aren't aware of what the payroll tax cut would do and how it benefits you, well, in a nutshell, because we've covered it in other videos, what it would simply do is it would save you 7% of taxes that you would normally have to dish out. Meaning you would get, in essence, 7% of your a bigger paycheck. So if it's $1,000 paycheck, you would see a $70 increase. Now, given we would still need to have Congress approve some type of loan forgiveness or forgiveness for payroll tax cut in there, just because it's an executive order. So legislation would still need to come into play later on to make sure that this is completely forgivable and that the government pretty much doesn't try to come back and say, okay, where's our money come tax season? It finally feels like things are starting to get pieced together, which is a breath of fresh air. I know that so many of you guys have been dependent off of the unemployment. So many of you guys have commented down below saying that you have no idea if you're gonna get evicted this month. So this is finally forward progress. Let's go ahead and take it for what it is. I know that good news as of late has been hard to come by. So let's go ahead and take the wins as we can. So there we have it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this update today. Again, let's take these wins for what they are, and hopefully we continue to get some good news as it gets released. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below if you found value in this content today. Hit that like button because apparently YouTube likes to share videos that have a ton of likes on them, and hit that notification bell so you can get notified every time we have content like this and updates dropping each and every single day. Once again, my name is Irvin Pena, also known as Irv Official. Until next time, everyone, we'll see ya.